This is going to be our first presentation. So the topic, or better say the question of the next presentation, this presentation would be, is Next Generation EAM more than Agile IT Planning? And actually we heard this morning, I think it was really an exciting presentation this morning. And we all sitting here, we know that digitalization is really changing most of the industries and also most of the business models. And this is even getting faster and faster. With that, yeah, classical enterprise architecture is often being called, yeah, like you can say like a roadblock for quick response and market demands. And this is because, yeah, you have quite some structures, governance structures, guidelines, structures, release processes and standards. And however, introducing this kind of agile development changed the game dramatically. Business started to do IT on their own and accelerated actually the release or the realization for functionalities. And I think that's the most important part for digital transformation in the related and their related business models. So New Generation EAM is now making use of these kinds of trends and mindsets and approaches of agile development. And the ability actually to, and this is what we heard also this morning, to make architecture transparent for everyone. And this is also what we see as LeanIX actually with our prospects and customers, is that the ability to let everyone really participate in the further development of architecture makes it necessary to use tools and applications, which we also see this morning, or saw this morning, like collaboration tools like Jira, Confluence, for development, but also then, of course, LeanIX for architecture management. And Sebastian Zeeb will be sharing with you the experience of the last couple of months, I would say, with the clients, with his clients, and in this particular area, and all the do's and don'ts maybe, which come along, and the lesson learned and best practices. So Sebastian is Senior Manager in the Technology Advisory of Deloitte Consulting and heading the architecture and integration cluster in Germany. He has over than 14 years of experience in IT management with over 8 years of experience in management consulting. He's TOGAF certified architect and supports his clients in different transformation projects, especially caused by current digitalization trends. So big applause for Sebastian.
Thank you.
Welcome. So Sebastian, it's your stage.
Thank you. I hope this will also end up like this. Thank you very much for being here at this breakout session, finding your way from this good meal, and I hope I will not bore you so much. I really like that I see so many common familiar faces, especially somebody who's really my teacher. If you want to know who this is, I will tell you at our booth. I divided this breakout session into 4 parts. Very small part, introduction. Then I want to talk about things that changed within the last years. Then I will talk about Next Generation EAM, or what we perceive this is or might be in the future, and end up with a summary. So at the end of the day, I have one slide for my boss, and this is this one, and I don't want to take so many time on that. If you're interested in the company, come to our booth. We are happy to talk to you about our service portfolio, but that's it for that. I want to go into the details. I was introduced already, so I can skip that too. I want to go into things that changed. So digitalization, and that's the first buzzword, changed the game, and that is common knowledge. We all know that. It's not only in the IT, it's also in the business. If we take, for example, companies like classic product-centric companies like automotive OEMs, for their functionality, they are bounded to the time their product is evolving. So this takes up to 52 months, for example, for a car. So updates are bound to product development cycles, several years. Their new entrants, like Tesla, they were able to decouple functionalities from the car and the IT and the service that they are providing. So they end up in updates they can release per week. And as we know, there are companies like Facebook, they have a continuous release. So many of the product-focused companies, they also want to step into that. And this means they have somehow to try to drive this into approach which decouples the functionality they are into. Classical product is designed for operations. They want to have an efficient operation. Companies like Facebook, they design for change because the business is changing all the time. And with the new products in the digitalization we find in many different companies, we think we have to change also into this direction. Having said that, I want to come into what is enterprise architecture during the last centuries. It already began in 1960s, 70s. At that time, we already had approaches on, well, like describing current and desired states and preparing action plans and implementing it, but it was very descriptive at that time. In the early enterprise architecture around the 80s and 90s, and mainly like Zachman and his framework, that was much more structured than it was today. That time. It was also describing current and future states and preparing implementation plans and implementing that, trying to put in some frameworks which help them to make this comparable. A more modern enterprise architecture, which is mainly based on such frameworks like the Open Group Architecture Framework, they are describing also the baseline and target states, but they are iterative nowadays. And now we come into a situation where we are embracing the shift towards a digital operation logic. This means you want to help your company being as fast as possible in providing the right technology to support your business model. Because IT is not a supportive function anymore. It is a core of the product and of the services which you're offering to your customers. So, I already said the market is changing, the customer behavior is changing, the whole industry is changing. And no matter if you are going through an evolution or a revolution, you have to keep up pace. And the challenge is that the complexity nowadays is still rising, and that was one of the reasons why enterprise architecture during the last years found so many people trying to implement this in the company. But now the companies are changing within their separation of duties too. Business is doing IT once again, like they did in the 80s. And it is in the product. So they are trying to get some digital platforms to integrate everything which they build. Like we see it in an automotive company we are working at the moment. All the new services are not provided by their own internal IT, because internal IT is still working with legacy, and they don't have the time to support business with their new IT ideas, their new business models. But at the end of the day, still they need to integrate this stuff. So these agile development influence the speed we find there. This makes it necessary to think how architects perceive themselves and are perceived within a company in their role and responsibility. So, we are not on the expert level anymore. It is about the awareness of the context the architecture is standing in. Once again, it's about culture. It's about collaboration, and it's about information. This change of perception and focus of the architecture roles on responsibilities. This means who is responsible to implement, to design, and to document the information we need for our products and for our services and for our IT. The organizational structures and the collaboration model needs to incorporate modern methods of operation. And tools need to meet the expectations in this new model, collaboration model. We heard this today. LeanIX, for example, is focusing on the user experience. When I'm looking back like 8 years ago, working on enterprise architecture management projects, we had big expert tools using, and it was not very easy implementing all the information we found into these tools. Like I have a colleague who made a training for one of those tools, and only to make an application, it takes 1 day, or a training of 1 day. And if you take the modern tools, and LeanIX is not the only one, but it's one of the good ones. Well, I tried it out. I haven't had the training, and I'm using it in a project just to show certain things. And that is, if you can imagine what you will be capable if people are really doing that all the time. And like in the project, everybody is able to put in the information, and everybody is able to use it. So this comes up with the big picture we had together with the client, which says we still need a common set of guiding principles, which should be minimal. And I'll step into that in detail in the next slide. This has to create a next generation mindset, not only in the IT or in the architecture community, but also in the complete company, bringing in the responsibility to put the information which is needed for everybody within the digital transformation. This will expand the collaboration and the organization and the work we do in architecture. And this needs to empower this distributed architecture work, not only in an ivory tower, but in all projects and in all teams. We can help this by providing a core set of digital platforms. They are needed to do much of the heavy lifting to operate the variety of digital services we have there. And it supports and increases the architecture automation. Especially, I will step into that with one of my last slides. And things we also see for ourselves in our community is thinking over what qualification and what career path you need for people who should be guides in this digital transformation. So I now will step into some of the details, not all of them. I don't think the time is enough to do that. So first of all, guiding principles. Architecture should be empowered. This means that the architects in their domain they are working in, they should be empowered, but also be accountable to decide on their own, not going into an architecture board to decide everything. They need to be empowered. They must know what to do, and they should work accountable for that, and they should feel accountable for that. It should be relevant. That means standardization activities are limited to areas where they create the relevant impact. That means we had that like years ago with, we had that also in a project, but we came now again up with that. A standard is not good because it's a standard. A standard is good because it gives you a value. And it don't gives you a value if you're just putting it over the whole company. It might be that several parts of the company just need to have freedom because they add tremendous value by having this freedom. Collaborative, I already talked about this. Architects are collaboratively responsible for creating sustainable system landscapes. So breaking up those silos with these architects, and they must feel as a community to be accountable for a complete system to work. Distributed. EAM is distributed practice throughout the company, not a central department. Several years ago, it was different, but we saw that this ends up in very often in companies that people are not working together. Discipline. Architecture decisions follow a disciplined, predictable approach. So this means are not going left and right all the time. You have to be to stuck to some of your rules you're providing, although they should be set to a minimal set. And rooted. Every architect participates actively at least in one product team. So they need to have a home, not in a central department, but within a product near to the business. Coming to how architects are perceived today. They are designers, planners, experts. And this contains the design for operation. They have the target state, or they contain this target state, they plan the target state, and they are expert in IT structure. And this needs to shift over to expand the design for change. The planner must have an evolutionary path, and the expert must not only be the expert for the IT structure, but the whole solution context. This is, again, very much into the product, into the business side. Architects are also perceived as enabler, evangelists, or facilitators. They are consulting within compliance concerning certain standards. They are consulting concerning technology, and they give individual guidance. But now they must empower their customers for yielding benefit. They must empower to yield best practice, and they must be facilitators of consumable artifacts they can use. So they are more getting the role of an integrator and a guide, more than the experts. So the architecture layers, as most of us know and are rooted, from my point of view, in the open group architecture framework very well, this stays unchanged. But we have to have a more focused view on where we divide the responsibilities. So we still have enterprise architects with their priorities, and they define a playground for a certain domain where domain architects can have their priorities depending on what has been done by the enterprise architects. And the solution architects will be defined a playground by the domain architects. The speed of change of the architecture artifacts are different, like very high speed of change in the solution, very low speed of change in the enterprise architecture. And the integration scope and relicense, this is the other way around, it's opposite. So often it is in a group or a brand or a company, there should be rooted an enterprise architect. The domains are often within a business domain, subdomain, and the solutions are within a program and a project or service. And this perception for the architects, this in combination with the perception of what their roles are, should define the way of collaboration. And I stole information from a colleague, from a client who's also sitting here. He held a speech last year here, and he showed these numbers, which was a 6-month implementation of LeanIX with user numbers and updates. So what we see, if we want to bring in a new mindset and a new way of working, a new perception, and we want to have everybody involved, then I cannot start with a tool, but I will need a tool. And the problem we have been facing in former times were, if we have decided a tool, it took us ages to ramp it up. So quick start is one success factor. We need something lean and light and out of the box, cloud-based. It needs integration capabilities, very good integration capabilities, especially towards modern tools which are used in the software development. And it must have a good user experience to really reach out through the company to everybody, not only the experts. And what we experienced with one of our clients was the integration of agile tooling with Confluence and Jira and LeanIX, this break up information silos. So the teams and individuals and so on, they were working together between development, business side, architecture. They jointly worked on requirements, on the architecture blueprint, as well as on methods and tools. And at the end of the day, they were able to provide a holistic overview with a business context, which often is missing. The second thing is methodology driven, is scaled agile framework, SAFe. We use this scale agile framework to be able to bring together the different working groups and the different product teams on one page together with the tool to be able to work jointly and promote and align and collaborate between the whole ecosystem of companies and co-workers. So we have at our client, for example, many of the development was done by third-party companies. So they are used to work like with Jira. So we have to incorporate that. So coming to architecture automation as a quick win. If I would say we can automate it, you would say, okay, this is like future state. But it's already happening. Imagine if you would be able to automatically use your blueprint and deploy it. That is already done, for example, with some of the services in AWS, or if you take, for example, Alexa, which can be deployed with your information you have quite quickly. And on the other hand, just imagine what would happen if your solutions could be visualized in blueprints also automatically. The information is already in systems and in CMDBs. But the question on how to bring them there, and we try to make a small POV on that by integrating ServiceNow with LeanIX. This helps to just bring up the knowledge, which sometimes is in the heads, but it's also in the systems, to be able to be much faster. And this acceleration you need for a quicker digital transformation. So coming to our experience, digitization favors change over operation. This means architects must much more be able to support change than to have efficient operations. From our point of view, next generation enterprise architecture management makes use of tools which you use for agile development, but it's much more than an agile IT architecture. It's about the empowerment as a major reason to invest in digital platforms. And you have to distribute your architecture work throughout a complete company. So if you ask yourself what you should do next, first of all, how much agile development is applied in your company? I've been working 5 years ago for a company who introduced agile development, and they are still on that. So if you are in the early stages, you should really couple your architecture working style together with this change. If you are in that, keep these people trained. Then secondly, what are the roles of your architects today and how are they perceived? If you think they are in an ivory tower and if you think they are just descriptive, you need to first of all change their mindsets. Third, you should empower your organization. That means, of course, you have to use training for that. And you have to ask who's responsible for architecture and enterprise architecture, and who is doing that. And sometimes it's not the same. They might be loosely coupled, but they should be closely aligned. And at the end, think about collaboration model first, but then select the right tools and methods to support your organization. As a common knowledge, a fool with a tool is still a fool, and this is the same and will stay the same. But at the end of the day, if you are expanding your work in architecture into several parts of your organization, you will have to have a tool which supports this collaborative aspect. So ITIL is core element of most products in companies and processes today, and so is architecture. I'd like to close with following a quote of Mr. Helbig, who is the former CIO from Deutsche Telekom. As digitalization is touching all areas of the enterprise architecture, which makes enterprise architects those who know Hitchhiker's Guide to the digital transformation. So they are the guides, like on a big tanker. A captain can sail his tanker on its own, but if they are coming into a harbor, they hand over the responsibilities to people who know how to do that. Don't panic. Thank you.